Hey everybody, it's T with Abduction Enigma podcast. So this week I've got on Jan Janders. I first saw Jan on the documentary by John Yost that just came out recently, Alien Abduction Answers. And I just had to reach out to him because he's got such a fascinating story. I think you guys will really enjoy this whole talk. Jan is quite fascinating. All right, let's get it. All right, Jan. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your backstory?
Okay. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1977. I was the official New Year's baby of Birmingham, Alabama. Um, my mom is from the Philippines. She has experience or stories of her own. She's a bit quiet. She hasn't even seen the film. She says she's going to watch it, but she hasn't. My dad is from Germany. I don't believe he has experience or stories, although he's now had experiences. I live in Chicago, Illinois, after grad school. So I have a Master of Architecture, and I do general design, like sculptural design, architectural design, interior design, landscape design. And I'm trying to think. My first experience that I remember as a child with the phenomena would be on a flight to the Philippines when I was in second grade. So I was 7 years old. And so there was that. And at the time, I didn't connect it with another strange experience, which was the experience with what I call the popcorn man. And that was around the same time. And at the time, I didn't know I didn't connect the two. And I thought maybe it was a ghost. It was very strange. And I was glad because all of that interest, seeing the UFO changed me. And I was so interested I checked out all the books on UFOs at my elementary school library. And a close friend at the time, he and I were interested in it. And we were always checking out the books back and forth. But the books had a limited appeal to me because when I would read the stories, I would look for the pictures first, of course. And what I did read, I didn't really read all the books. I wasn't because what I read wasn't what I experienced exactly. The only common thread was instant acceleration. Other people had like these lights and stuff like that, and that wasn't what I had seen. And then my dad had brought, I guess I checked out the Condon Report. I hadn't really read it. It looked boring at that age, but my dad pointed out that they concluded that there was nothing to the topic. And that was very frustrating for me because I just knew they were wrong. And anyway, finally, when I went from elementary school to high school, I kind of put that chapter behind. You're meeting an expanded group of people, new people, and I didn't want to be the strange kid that had seen a UFO. Most people hadn't. And so I just kind of forgot about it. And it wasn't until I was in Chicago in August of 2014 when I stumbled across on Netflix. I'd seen them, but for some reason, there was this one particular documentary on UFOs, and I don't know what the title is, but the cover picture is the White House, and there's like an army general in front of it, and half of his face is human and half is like some very bizarre non-human face. And it looked so like Hollywood. It looked stupid. And I just had no interest in that. It didn't appeal to me. But I watched something, and I don't remember which one, but it dealt with contact. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I started looking, and I realized there was like a top 10 UFO stories, and there were some different ones. And one of my favorite ones is I Know What I Saw 2007. At the time, that was That was a really good one, and it lit a fire in me again. And this wasn't in the movie, but the movie only covered so much. Our movie, Alien Abduction answers, and in that morning, after watching like maybe 2 or 3 of these films and staying up quite late, there was a knocking on my window at like 5:45 in the morning, and or maybe it was 4. I think it was still dark, and there was a knocking on the window, and it was it was loud, and I live on the top floor corner unit of a building in Chicago, so there shouldn't be a knocking on my window. Now there could be window cleaners and things like that. I had the shades closed, and I could have raised them, but I was scared at that point. I didn't understand it. I went back to sleep. The knocking came back, woke me up again, and I was just freaked out. And my boyfriend was there. He was asleep, and I waited until he woke up, and I asked him if he had heard it. He didn't. He had not. And I actually went up to the window to just try to knock on the window to let him know what it would sound like, to see if it sounded familiar. And I like jumped back, because when I knocked on the window, you don't realize it, but you have a knock. Like when you go up to someone's door and you knock, you will have a knock pattern. And I knocked, and the knock was identical to the knock that I heard. So, I was like, I thought like, oh, let me just repeat the knock, a knock. No, it was the knock. I mean, everything. It was the knock. And which I think is really quite fascinating. And so anyway, that started me down the rabbit hole. I was back full on interested in contact. That is a very long story that progressed to them using my call box, them calling me, because I started, I was baffled by the whole, this is how I connected. This is when I connected my UFO sighting with the Popcorn Man. So I was trying to explain to my boyfriend, who had just moved. He had just moved in with me, and he had moved from Hawaii. So, and he had no idea about my interests, and he didn't share it. He wasn't opposed to it, but it wasn't interesting to him. So I was talking to him about it. I was freaked out about it in the morning. I was like, there's this weird knocking, and I think it came 2 or 3 times that morning. And I checked to see if there were window washers. It was a Saturday. I know it was a Saturday because there were no window washers, and we get notices. There's ways to know, but anyway, I thought about it, and I thought about knocking, and I thought about knocking. If you were an entity or an intelligence trying to make contact in a kind and respectful manner, and you knew something about how we introduce ourselves, well, what do? If we're at someone's door, we knock. That's how you introduce yourself. So I was like, well, gosh, it was just knocking, and maybe they were just introducing themselves. And I said immediately, I said, but you do not knock on someone's window. I was like, you would knock on the front door. And I said, well, in our case, you would call through the call box. Well, it was like the next night or a few days later, that's exactly what they did. At 4:45 in the morning, again, the phone started ringing. And at that time I had a landline. And so in the call box had my cell number, and it had my landline number. And they were calling only one of them. I can't remember which one it was. It was like my name with my last initial, or my last name with, it was like Jander J or Jander JA. And so I thought, when the phone rang at that hour, it's very strange. It's dark outside, your phone is ringing, it's very jarring, and you can see on the caller ID. And I thought, and the number looked familiar, but I didn't recognize it as the front door. I knew it was a Chicago number, but I just didn't want to answer the phone. So I thought, well, if it's important, they'll leave a message. They did not leave a message. So I ignored it. 15 minutes later, they call again. So anyway, I did go down. I played with the call box. While I was playing with the call box later that morning, I bumped into several neighbors and I asked them if their call box had called them. And they said no, because it could be a drunk person just calling every single number in the call box. That doesn't really happen, but I thought maybe that was an explanation. No one else had it. And then the other strange thing was, if someone was down at my door and they were trying to get a hold of me, they would call both numbers, or I would call both numbers, because one's Jander J and one's Jander JA. Why not try both if he's not answering on one? And why not leave a message? But that was when I realized, at that point I remember, and then I said, I think they're trying to make contact. And I said, what, I thought about it. What would be at that level, now I'm very comfortable with it. It's fine. But at that point I thought, what would I be comfortable with? And what I said was, if way off in the distance, I saw a light and it slowly came towards me, then I think I would have the element of surprise would be taken away. And I could kind of prepare myself, as opposed to, like, I had this fear that I was going to take out the trash one night and a being was going to just pop into existence. And I remember before taking out the trash, I would literally mentally say, please do not do this. Like, do not pop into existence. I'll lose I'll lose it. And anyway, so you can guess that the light happened. And a few days later, maybe weeks, I don't know, I reported it to MUFON. But what was cool is that light, I was looking up dental insurance on my computer, and I've lived in this same unit since 2004, and I know the view of Chicago, and I look east over Chicago, and so planes fly, all kinds of crap, and but there was this bizarre bright light, very, very bright, hovering on top of a building, and I just was like, well, that's weird. It caught my eye. And I actually called my boyfriend over to the window to look. And I thought I was going to have to, give coordinates of where to look. No, he immediately knew the light, because it was unusual. And it just kind of moved over the edge of the building, and it made a 45-degree down. And then it just blipped out of existence. And right before it blipped out, there was a red light, a smaller red light. So it was a big white light. And then there was a little red light, and then it was gone. And when I saw the red light, I thought, oh, it's a helicopter. But then the whole thing was gone. So anyway, it was strange enough that I reported it to MUFON at the time. Anyway, so that, as I went through all that, and the whole idea of peaceful contact, and them, knocking at the door, using my call box, I just started to try to get into their mind, how would I approach someone in a respectful, non-frightening way? I mean, everything was frightening. And even though it shouldn't be, but it was the unknown. And that was when I realized, I started to think back about that popcorn man that visited me. And everything he did was to, his whole ridiculous persona he was on this bicycle with this enormous umbrella and this 3-piece suit. And he had a giant thing of popcorn in front of his bike. So the closest thing between me and him was this giant thing of popcorn. That's not very frightening. And he was on a bicycle in mid-pedal, just hovering there. So it was very obvious that if he tried to move, he would have this very ridiculous, he had a huge front tire, the bicycle, those old-timey kind. So, if he tried to come at me, he had this large bicycle with a huge umbrella over it that would obstruct his path, make it difficult to navigate the room. And I think that was to kind of make him not frightening to me. And I liked popcorn very much. And I looked at my old pictures, for the movie, they asked us to send in pictures of us at that age. And I saw that I'd had birthday parties at a place called Farrell's Ice Cream. And the outfit for the waiters was the stripes and straw hats. And I loved it. I loved Farrell's Ice. That was exciting. So I think they took on a shape that I would find that I loved, that was happy for me. Of course, there was, out in that context, it's very different. But I think they were doing everything they could to allow me to remember the experience and be at peace with the experience. I think that's what I would take away from all of that. So anyway, that was a long one. So sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. So do you think that was like a cover memory kind of thing, or?
Gosh, it could be, because, a really good cover memory, what would be the difference between a cover memory and them? I think it's almost like, what's the word? It's just vocabulary, because them making me think that, or them taking that form versus giving me a cover memory, or my body, or perhaps, I guess the difference would be, did they do it or did my body do it? Or did they help my body do it? But whatever it was a pleasant one. Like, John Yost had Alterman.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know what his name is. Alterman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, because I never followed Alterman as a child. But I don't know if he had a pleasant relationship with Alterman. I think he did. I don't know. But what was I going to say about that? I don't know. I felt like it was benevolent. What I can say also is that I revisited that experience. So when I started going down the rabbit hole of Contact and all that, I'd followed Dr. Greer, was one of the first people I started following. And he had talked about, these different meditations you can do to make contact and invite them and stuff like that. And I was doing that, and it works. And there was a point where I joined a CE5 group. I'd read this book called Paths to Contact by, oh my God, Jeff Becker, and who is like, has a military background, was an engineer on nuclear submarines, and also did CE5 with Dr. Greer. And he put this book together, which is phenomenal. And I bought it thinking I was buying a Clifford Stone book, but because Clifford Stone was promoting it, and I really liked Clifford Stone's story, it resonated with me. And so I got Paths to Contact, which each chapter is a different person representing a different walk of life, like, blue collar person, medical doctor, engineer in the military, whatever. And it's just their experience with what's called high strangeness. And anyway, in that book, I that's how I met Jeffrey Becker, who hosts CE5s. And I wrote to him because I had some questions about the book. And then he invited me to his CE5 group. And so I started doing that. And this is I'm giving every single detail on that. But anyway, long story short, I had done a regression where I revisited the Popcorn Man experience. And so I was able to relive it. And so going to your question of, was it a screen memory, or was it some kind of or was that it? What I can say is that in the regression, which was absolutely amazing, where I literally relived it, and not only, and this wasn't in the movie, I relived it, and then it kept going. It went further. And what happened is, before, when he made eye contact with me, that was when my memory blanked out. But when I relived it, he made eye contact with me, and then I floated towards him. And when I say I, visually, I had the perception of floating towards him, but I don't know what I was. Like, all I know was that I could see, if I was a camera and they floated me up toward him, that was what it was. When I got to him, he was no longer, he had transitioned from being the popcorn man to just white light. He was just white light. And I was aware that I was also just white light. And I don't really know how to explain that other than that. But it made sense. And we merged. And when we merged, I then felt this incredible love for, I don't know, well, the very first time, so I did this twice. So I merged with him and I got a download and it was, we are one. But no explanation of what that meant. Like, does that mean that he's me in another timeline, in another life, or just kind of a general broad, everyone is one? I don't know. And at that point, I popped out of the regression. And I think that was like a protection from my own self-conscious or whatever, just to see, that was kind of a lot of information. How are you doing? How are you processing it? So I popped out and I was excited about it. I went to the bathroom, I went back and regressed and did it again. And this time I merged with him, got we are one. And then what was crazy is I suddenly, the experience, the visual, went back in time and I relived the whole experience from his perspective. So I was back in my room. I was in the bed asleep and I was now the popcorn man. I was sitting where the popcorn man was, looking back at myself in the bed asleep. Then I see myself wake up and get up and I saw my face, and it's like a little me, it's like 7-year-old Jan. And I know what sweater I was wearing. I know, and I saw myself, I saw my jaw drop. I was sitting up in bed staring at me. And I just was doing that. And when I saw that, it was really cool, a very cool experience to relive. Then I felt this unbelievable love for me. And that I assume was the popcorn man looking at me. And I just knew that the love that the popcorn man felt for me. And it was so intense that I remember in the regression, tears were pouring out of my eyes and they were filling up my ears because I was laying on my back. And I just blissed out, and that was it. And it changed the way I looked at the experience. I realized it was a very loving experience. I guess you could say maybe that was a screen memory. You can second guess anything, but what I can tell you is I don't think anything bad has happened to me. I haven't had any bad experiences. So anyway, another long one, but yeah, that was that.
Oh, you're fine. Take as long as you need. So I don't think that people have negative experiences. I think it's more or less perceived that way. As far as, why it happens, I couldn't tell you. I've never been that guy to claim to have all the answers. But
Right.
from what you're telling me, and this is just my takeaway from it, it sounds like maybe whatever the popcorn man was showed you the experience from its perspective, for lack of a better term, and let you relive it from that perspective as well. The reasoning why I couldn't tell you, but it's quite fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Well, he did. There was the message, we are one. So I don't know what that means, but just my digging down the rabbit hole, Grant Cameron is someone that I really respect the work, the contributions he's done in the field. And he talks about the idea that we're all consciousness, deep down, like we're these little, maybe sparks of light. And there's the possibility that we're all, Dr. Greer talks about this too, that we're all a sea of consciousness and we're all just little drops. We're just little fractals of the same consciousness. And in this frequency existence, we're in a frequency where we agree to forget what we really are, so that we have this illusion of individuality and can experience a broader range that's possible that you wouldn't have if you were everything. If you were everything, there would be no concept of self, there would be no individuality, and all of those experiences couldn't be experienced. So, it gets quite, I think the whole contact thing, it starts to open up a lot of spiritual questions. I was not raised in a religious, religion did not speak to me. So that wasn't really a barrier for me for contact. In fact, I don't know, I contact it, while there was a period where I didn't know what was going on and I was afraid a being might just appear in front of me. And there's plenty of scary visitation stories online. I was actually very excited by the idea that there is something more to our existence. There are, we're not alone in the universe and all that. I found that very comforting. And yeah, so I don't know. I think contact, we're learning more about ourselves. I think John Yost says that you end up looking, you're looking for contact out there or up. And ultimately, the journey is going to take you inside into what we really are and what they really are. And I think in a way, we are them in this sort of greater sense of we're more than, we're not just this reality. I think we're a lot more. There's many kind of an infinite reality. We're tuned into this one at this time. I don't know. I don't have the answers, but something along those lines. I think that we are more connected than we realize, and I think it's it's kind of cool. It's a cool thing.
I agree with that. And you being frightened of an entity appearing out of nowhere, I think that's what trips most people up.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what people go the negative route with, is they like look at Whitley Strieber, for instance. He had an entity pop around his doorway. It's kind of frightening.
Sure.
So I get your perspective on, not wanting that to happen. And again, I think that's why a lot of people take it the negative way, is because something like that does happen, and it just kind of startles them a little bit.
I agree. I was curious, what brought your interest into all of this?
Well, what brought me into all of this, it's kind of a hard thing to explain, because originally, like, I've always been interested in weird stuff. When I was younger, I saw a couple documentaries and things like that. I wouldn't even call them documentaries. They were just TV shows, and usually playing in the background while I was doing something. I started out more interested in like cryptozoology. It's just something that nobody else was really getting too much into. And best way to explain it is, I remember this show titled Unexplained Mysteries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had an alien abduction episode on, and one part just stuck out to me. And that was Debbie Cobble, or Debbie Jordan, if you're familiar with her from Bud Hopkins' book Intruders.
Okay.
They played a 5-second piece of her regression tape on there, of her claiming they were taking a baby from her, and her just sobbing and saying, "No, it's mine," just an emotional response. And for whatever reason, that has stuck with me all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
In about 2008, I don't know, it just hit me out of nowhere. I think it was like, Ancient Aliens was on. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I started watching it, and then, man, like a ton of bricks, it just hit me. And all of a sudden, I just started doing a ton of UFO research. And then you move past the UFO research because you find validation in it. And you go, okay, what's behind the UFOs then? Which has led me on the contactee / alien abduction phenomena, where, now I've been going on that for quite a while now.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started. It's a long-winded explanation, but
No.
I mean.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, I can relate, unexplained mysteries, unsolved mysteries, all that. I was watching that as a child too. There was even a series of books, I think, for the unsolved mysteries. I thought it was very interesting. And that kind of that digging yeah, there's that bizarre desire to find out more information. That's like, that just came over me, you know, after the knocking and all that. I guess you just realize that there really is more, and you're looking for answers, you know. The After the movie came out, it was really interesting. After I'd done my interview, I think it was after the interview for the movie. It was like a weekend. We did that. There was a sense of calm that came over me. I think there was a part inside of me ever since I was a child, ever since I saw that Condon report, ever since, you know, you want to share and you want people to know what you've seen. And finally, I think John Yost doing that, I felt heard. There was a part of me that was like, okay, you've been heard. And it was such a relief. And it just kind of, I don't know, I'm very much at peace with all of it. And I used to do CE5s like every month since 2015, when I started doing like actually going to a group. It was the summer of 2015. Anyway, and now I still do it. I'm about to go to one right now. And but it's not as I don't know, it's not as much. I've moved on. I kind of feel like the message, I've maintained contact, and I still have experiences, but I'm not as focused on it. I mean, the last contact experience earlier this year, I was in Joshua Tree, and we had just an amazing CE5. We called it, the group called it HICE, Human Initiated Consciousness Experience, I think. And anyway, there was a series of lights, and basically we did a 3-day contact thing. And long story short, I did a report on it. But I was led to believe that these lights, these green lights that we were seeing, basically had let me know that where they were on the horizon, which looked like a Joshua Tree straight down this path. I just had to walk about a mile, and I would meet them. And I was very excited. But basically I went, and what it was is interesting. There was the ground was actually doing a little bit of a valley. So where I was, what I was seeing, they were actually above a giant rock mound, these lights, which I figured out in the day. But when I walked, I was going down, and in the middle of the valley, there's a Joshua Tree. And so the Joshua Tree and the mound, the rock mound, as you're doing the path, they kind of merge. So in the night when it's dark, I got to the Joshua Tree and I walked past it. You know, there's nothing at the Joshua Tree. And I walked past the Joshua Tree, and there's nothing on the horizon, because I'm now in the valley looking up. So I don't see the rock mound anymore. So I, you know, logically, based on the distortion of the ground, thought that I was there. And I was kind of upset, because I was like, there's no one here? It's just a Joshua Tree. And so, but mentally they started communicating with me, and they're like, we're here. You can't see us. We're here. Just communicate with the Joshua Tree. Pretend the Joshua Tree is us. And you know, what's your question? What do you want to know? And I was kind of stunned, because really what they showed me was that 99.9% of my excitement was the visual, just seeing them. I wanted to prove to myself that in a very conscious, awake state, I could see them and not get scared, and have the conversation. And because there's so much contact, but the contact it's not as much about like, you know, it's not like going and having tea with someone. And so I really was looking forward to seeing like humanoid type beings or something, you know, and looking at them. But when they said, you know, ask us your question, you know, all the questions seemed stupid. All of a sudden, everything seemed stupid. And like I could say, how did you get here? Where are you from? But like, what's that going to tell me? You know, I felt like that was stupid. So I didn't want to ask that. I finally thought, I said, my first question was, who am I? And they said, you're an infinite being, an infinite soul, something like that. And I was like, well, I kind of already knew that, you know, like we're souls that live on, like this is one incarnation. And so then I thought for a second, I thought, oh, is there any like catastrophic event that I should know about, that might happen in the future, in my lifetime? And then I thought, whoa, don't answer that. I actually don't want to know the answer to that. And then I just sat there. And then they asked me a question and they said, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And I was like, whoa, I hadn't thought of that. And then I realized, that was when I realized, oh my God, it's like really superficial. I really actually kind of just wanted to see what you looked like, you know? And I realized that's why they weren't like that. Like, well, one, it might have, you know, scared me. But it also would have deflected the conversation. You know, it would have been based on a very superficial what they look like. And I realized that, and they said, they were like, you know, you have a question, ask us. I still don't have a question. That was like this spring. But I've realized, you know, I could be in my bedroom. I can be anywhere and mentally connect with them and ask them the question. But I still don't really have the question. I'm seeing something that says we have less than a minute left. Is that, should I be concerned about that?
No, I think you're fine. I'm not sure what that means, but we're
Okay.
good.
Okay. But anyway, but it gave me a kind of a sense of, it just made me really kind of step back. And the thing that I think the message I also got from it is this earth experience is the most important. And if whatever brings you joy, like that is like Whitley Strieber, his talk that he gave at Rice University earlier this year in their, I forget what it's called. They have this great lecture series. And I went, that's where I did my Master of Architecture as Rice. So it's kind of this interesting connection. But since he's doing this series, you know, Rice University is archiving his fan letters, which is like, I think over, I don't know, it's a lot, like over 100,000. And in this lecture, he read one fan